Vishyanan, and I'm the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects prospective law students to lawyers for mentoring to help them learn a little bit more about the legal profession before they dive into law school. And we started hosting these Zoom meetups every Tuesday and Thursday at noon Central Time, where we bring in lawyers and law school admissions consultants and other folks who know about the legal profession to share their stories with you and share their expertise. And so I'm very excited today to be introducing Katherine Porter, and she's going to be talking to you today about designing a career that suits you. So Katherine, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks. So like she said, I'm Katherine, and in my co-host that you've seen walking by is Feisty the cat. She likes getting love on the screen, so feel free to admire her. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to talk about designing your career, and I want to start with a story. So, you know, when I was born, like I wasn't even supposed to be here. Like, I don't mean here as in like in law school or on this call. I mean here like on this planet. Like, nobody knew I existed. My mom didn't know, the doctors didn't know. There was a nurse who suspected, but we didn't find out about that till later. There was one person who knew I existed, but she wasn't really, for the first 6 minutes of her life, she wasn't really in a position to talk to anybody and tell them. So everybody else had to wait 6 minutes to figure it out. And it got something like this. Oh, wait, there's another one. And my mom's reaction was, you can tell my husband. Because back then, you know, dads weren't even allowed in the delivery room. And my sister doesn't tell that story anymore because it just points out that we are so old, ultrasounds weren't a thing then, right? So you probably have guessed I have a twin sister, and we're fraternal twins. She's 6 inches taller and has red hair, but she sounds just like me. And anyway, so yeah, oh, how funny. So, you know, think about the delivery room experience now. It's completely different. The dads are welcome. Dads are in there. The nurses are in there. I mean, it's just a totally different the whole thing is a really different experience. It's all centered around the family and also the doctors, but all the different people that are involved have a role, and you know, they designed the whole experience in a different kind of way. And that's what good design does. It looks at the problem from a bigger perspective and really puts the humans at the center of the design. So you might be wondering, why do I call this the design your career the way Apple designs iPhones? Your iPhones are products, they're not a career. But think about the way Apple developed the iPhone. They don't just create the product, the cell phone, they've designed the entire experience around their customer. From the quirky ads on TV, you go to the beautiful laid out store, you buy the iPhone, it comes in this beautiful white box, you open it, you use it, it's beautiful to look at. And they've just done everything thinking about the consumer and their whole journey through the product. And in the similar way, your career is not a product, but it's not just a job either. It's an experience. And instead of, a grand Apple, you don't have as many customers to think about as Apple, you are the human at the center of your design. So the approach that Apple and other companies like Nike and Pepsi and a lot of others use to design their products is called design thinking. And I think what makes design thinking so special is that it starts at that human level. It starts with the people involved. And it's all designed, things are designed with the users in mind, the customers, the clients, or ourselves in our careers. So to really understand how design thinking is different, I'm going to ask you, if you have a piece of paper, you can do it, or you can just do it in your head. I want you to draw a vase. And I'm going to draw a vase too. I'm going to guess, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I'm going to guess most of your designs look something, I don't know, can you see that? Like that, right? A vase. Okay, and now I want you to close your eyes or grab your pen and design a way to enjoy fresh cut flowers in your home. And if the first thing that comes to your mind again is a vase, push yourself, say, well, what else? What other ways could there be? And try to get creative. So I don't know, hopefully you've had a different, a different design, a different take on it, and a different perspective. And that's kind of what designers do. They try to think about the experience that they're creating and not just a solution. And when I asked you to draw a vase, what I was doing really was anchoring you to a solution. And the problem wasn't how to draw a vase, it was how do we get beautiful fresh cut flowers into people's homes. So that could be solved a lot of different ways. Whereas a vase is a vase. It's generally, it holds water. It's usually tallish and, sealed so water doesn't leak, things like that. And it's not that that isn't helpful, but designers think in that broader term, and you really want to frame the question in a way that opens the scope of possibilities. And I think that's true for our careers too. You don't want to limit yourself to just one preconceived idea. You want to open yourself up to different possibilities. So, you don't want to be with our legal careers. I would suggest that you don't be anchored to the idea of being a lawyer. You might ask yourself the question or reframe the question. Instead of saying, what kind of lawyer do I want to be? You want to maybe tie in your values or priorities. So you might say, what kind of work can I do that will allow me to work towards a more sustainable earth? And that could be being a lawyer. It could be being a lobbyist. It could be writing policy. It could be a lot of other things besides being a lawyer. So that still build on your skills that you developed in law school, but also just kind of opens your world. So I encourage you to think about your careers in terms of framing them in terms of your values and priorities, and knowing that those will change over time, but they give you a place to start and they open up your possibilities instead of anchoring to the solution of being a lawyer. So, coming out of law school, seems like there's a few common types of approaches. Some people just know they want to be the big law lawyer. They want to make partner. They want to have the fancy office. They want to either, make the big deals or make the rain and bring in business and be a powerful litigator and trial attorney and handle big cases. And that's great. And then there's some of us that are like, maybe you have some idea of the kind of law that you want to work on, but you're not really sure. And then there's some of us like, I just want a job, right? And then there's others like, well, I don't really know. Maybe I don't want to be a lawyer. Maybe I want something else. I don't really know. I've put in this degree. So, and that's okay. Like being totally unsure is not a problem when you're when you're using design thinking, because designers, they don't try to know all the answers. They don't know what the end result is going to be. They iterate, they change, they design something, they test it out. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, they've gathered that information and they go back and try a different design. So you can do that same thing.
I really like what you're saying. So I wanted to hone in on that a little bit because I wanted to note that it really doesn't matter if you're at that unsure stage at any point in your career. You could be at that stage before you're thinking about going to law school. You could be at that stage while you're in law school. You could be at that stage even after you graduate and you're like, what in the world am I going to do with my life? And
right.
It's totally okay to say that you can be at that unsure stage no matter where you are in your career, and that's totally fine. And I think all these principles can apply for you no matter what stage of your journey you're in. So I know, when I was in law school, I always thought, okay, if I don't know 100% what I want to do right now, and I'm a third year student, I'm super far behind. And that's just not true. No. You can make these decisions for yourself and change your mind at any point.
Exactly. That's basically what I did. I mean, I went to law school. I was a teacher first. My whole family is teachers, so it was like no surprise. And in California, it's a 5th year credential. So it was after I graduated from undergrad. And and so, I taught for a couple of years, and I guess I kind of prototyped it. I didn't think of it that way, but, growing up as the daughter of teachers, my sister and I spent a lot of time in the classroom, and, whether it's putting up bulletin boards or grading tests or whatever, helping my mom out, whatever it was, we were sort of got the feel for what it was, a little bit about what it was like to be a teacher. So, I did that for a couple of years, and then it just didn't really feel right. And then I had a friend of mine go to law school, and she was halfway through her first year, and I was like, that sounds kind of interesting. Maybe I should do that. So I told myself I'm going to take the LSAT, and if I get a good enough score to go to a good school, I'll go. So I did, and I ended up at UCLA. So, but I didn't really think about, do I want to be a lawyer? Like it was, so I totally just always going like, what do I want? How is it going to look? Um, and I've had a couple of other career changes, and I'll talk about one of those in a minute, but it's true. You can just always be asking yourself, like, how does this feel? And like with design thinking, you're always gathering new information and redesigning. I mean, go back to the iPhone example, like the precursor to the iPhone is the iPod. And, did Apple know when they designed the iPod that eventually we'd all be carrying, little computers on our wrists? They might have had an idea and a vision, but they certainly didn't know exactly how it would work or whether people would like it or not. They didn't, otherwise they would have designed it back then, but they didn't. And so they've just constantly refined their designs to really reflect the humans that are using them. So we can do the same thing in our career. Like Angie said, at any point you can go in and say, hey, like, what else could I do here? What else might I want to try? Might I want to prototype? So, I think if that researchers at Apple didn't know exactly what the end product is, it's probably okay for you to not know what the end product of your career is too. So, and design thinking, it's not like you're going in blind. You do have some information. So, like if you're a really impulsive, fly by the seat of your pants kind of person and a great thinking on your feet person, then, maybe like trial is the thing for you. And you'd probably be really unhappy in a job that was 90% sitting at a desk looking at documents. On the other hand, if you'd rather talk to books than people, you might like a job where you get to do a lot of research and analysis and that kind of thing. And maybe you wouldn't take a role that's super client facing. And so that can really like help you narrow your job search and help you identify roles that you think might be a good fit. I mean, there's always other outside pressures. Like sometimes you just need a job and you try something out and you don't always have the best information, but you just do the best you can with the information that you have at the time. And the other thing about design thinking is designers have a bias towards action. It's taking that step, even if you're not totally sure how it's going to be. And I know a lot of us tend to be perfectionists. We tend to have all the answers before we even step foot. But I would encourage you to take that next step, anyway, even if you don't have all the information, because it may surprise you. You may end up someplace where you didn't expect. And you can't always know it's perfect. So I had a job. I was at one firm for a long time, and then it was time to leave. So I went into a consulting firm in a similar field. And I wasn't technically a lawyer, but we all thought like it would be great to have that legal perspective when they're responding to RFPs for public agencies. Most of the work was public agency work. So, and everybody was like super excited to have me on part of the team, and it was great. But and you knew there'd be a but probably, right? So, but one of the disadvantages was there wasn't really a clear role and expectation for that role. So I didn't know, what they wanted one month was different than what they wanted the next month. And so I didn't really understand what success looked like in that role. And, even though everybody was excited about it, sometimes things just don't work, right? So then there was some disagreements at the executive level, and the executives that were more supportive of me were left the firm. And so then, I was left with the one executive who totally saw my role completely different than I saw it. And that didn't last. And not surprisingly, they let me go. Now I could walk away and be like, oh man, I failed. I didn't do a good job. I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have been more proactive. I should have been more aggressive, all these things. But if I think about it as a prototype, then I'm like, okay, it was a learning experience. Now I know, like when I go into a company, if I do end up working for a company again, I'm going to want to know what that role is and who's on board with that role, and how am I going to know I'm successful in that role? And am I going to have the support that I need to be successful, because that was one of the other issues at that firm was, part of what they brought me in for was to develop business. They were trying to establish a presence in Southern California. And, and so I was going to things, but then it was like, well, no, you can't go to all these different things. We're not going to pay for it anymore. I'm like, okay, well then how am I going to make connections if you don't send me into events? Right. So, that's something that now will inform my next choice. Yeah. So I think don't be afraid to take a job, even though it might not seem like the perfect fit, because you don't always know until you try. Like I said, but you kind of know, you have some idea. Like if you're vegan, you probably don't want to work for the Texas Beef Council, if there is such a thing. So, so you have some idea, you have your values and priorities to sort of guide you, even if you don't always know where your destination is.
But I also like the thought of not treating it as you have to make it work, you have to make it fit.
Yeah.
I think it's good to know, but that you're not really going to get a sense of the culture of an organization until you're probably already knee deep. So
Right.
it's okay. I think all of us, of course, we come out of law school hoping that our first job will be our last. That, we're going to love the place that we're at and people are going to be great and we're going to learn a ton and that things are going to be fantastic. But that might not be the case. And that doesn't mean that you're a failure or that the legal profession's not for you. It just means that this job isn't for you. And that's totally okay. There's nothing bad about that, but it might take you a couple tries before you find the right fit. And I like the idea of treating it as a kind of a hypothesis that you're testing.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
showing up for work and deciding, okay, today, these are my goals, and is this job helping me accomplish this goal? Is this job actually proving my hypothesis true, that it's making, it's fulfilling, it's making me happy, or not? If it's not, then, maybe are there other things that I could be doing at this job that could improve its chances of being successful? Or if you've done that as much as you could and you just decided, you know what, I've tried to make it work here and this is not working out, then what other roles can you look for that'll be closer to what you were thinking? And, it'll take some time, but as you're practicing as a young lawyer, you'll also hear the stories of all your friends who are practicing as young lawyers, and that will help you test your hypotheses too, because
Exactly.
you'll get to hear other people's experiences and you'll realize, oh, even though this is my experience in this junior role, that's not everybody's experience in a junior role. So maybe, as you learn more about different types of roles, your goals will change. Your thoughts about what's fulfilling will change. And so then you can move more towards that.
Right. Exactly. And I think like what Angie's talking about is you really develop a failure immunity, because you're not failing, you're just gathering information. And sometimes in the moment it can feel like failure, but it really isn't. And it's really just a way to try stuff out. So when you go in with that mindset of curiosity of, hey, I'm going to, see where this takes me and whether it's a good fit for me, and you have that curiosity, I think it really helps. And just thinking of it as a prototype is just a really helpful thing. I had one client, she, this is a small example, but it illustrates the point, I think, really well. She was an avid reader, and, during the pandemic, we're all feeling isolated. She lives alone. So she was like, I'm going to join an online book club. But then she was like kind of hesitating about it because she knew herself. She's like, well, once I commit to it, I'll stick with it. And I won't quit, even if it's like too busy, or I don't like the people, or I don't like the books. I'll feel like I'm committed. And she's like, but after working with me, she says, well, now I looked at that as a prototype. So I signed up for the book club and I'm treating it like a prototype. And if I don't like it, or it doesn't fit my schedule, or whatever it is, I can quit. Like, I don't have to stick with it. It's a prototype. I'm just testing it out. And so that mindset shift was really helpful for her. And yeah, okay, that's a book club. It's not, your whole future, but you can have that same perspective when you are taking your first job or your second job or whatever it is. And it's funny. I think we get trapped sometimes by different limiting beliefs. And I know, like with my first firm, I was actually with them for 17 years. And now that I look about it, it was almost like an ego thing. Like not ego as an arrogance, but ego in like, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to do it my way. And, I took some time off for my kids and reduced schedule and different things. And then when I came back, and I was like ready to jump in, I was met with a lot of negative comments and negative feedback, like, well, we just don't see you that way. And all these things, because I hadn't set myself up well before I took the alternative schedule. So, which is not an unusual story for women in law, but my point is like, I stuck with it for way too long, trying to make it work instead of just, cut bait and move on to the next position is probably what I'd wished I'd done. But on the other hand, it wouldn't have brought me here. So it's all good. But that was just, a time where you can get stuck in thinking you have to stick with something for whatever reason. And sometimes it's a sunk cost. Like, I don't want to waste my education, or I don't want to waste, the money I spent on X, Y, or Z, or, whatever it is, that sunk cost mindset can really block you. And the other thing that I think is really important and draws back in the designer's mindset is designers don't fall in love with any one design. So the idea is that you don't fall in love with, your first choice of a job. And so even though I wanted to work at that firm, I really liked the people and all these things, it just, at the end of the day, it wasn't a good fit. And so I think you don't get too wedded to your first experience, whether it's a practice group or a type of law or a role, or whatever choice is about it that might not be working for you. Don't get wedded to it. Just be willing to try something different and think a little differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of times lawyers, especially and law students, we get committed to this idea that if it's not a success, it's a failure. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
Because sometimes your biggest failures might actually be a success. So this actually reminds me of the story of the Post-it note. So 3M created the Post-it note by accident. So the guy who was supposed to create the guy who ended up creating the Post-it note was tasked to create a super strong adhesive, but he failed, and instead he created a super weak adhesive. And then when they applied it to a piece of paper, that piece of paper would stick to something temporarily, but then it was removed, right? And at first they thought this was useless, so it actually sat at 3M for years without them ever debuting it. But then finally they launched it as the Post-it note, and now it's widely used everywhere. So I think it's interesting to note that sometimes your biggest failures can indeed be a success.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to try something and let it fail, and maybe that leads you to something better.
Exactly. And so, there's a way to do prototyping, to kind of not only viewing your job as a prototype, but other ways to do prototyping that aren't necessarily a whole entire position or a job. You can do mini prototypes. And, because really the concept of a prototype in design, when you're designing a product, it's like a low resolution, simple design, right? So like I had a friend that was taking a design thinking course, and his job was to prototype a chair. Or I think the designer would say, how do you suspend a human in space, right? And so, he did it with cardboard and I think some Post-it notes. So, and and that was the prototype, right? So there are smaller ways to prototype before you get out and to make an entire job change. So you can have prototyping conversations, like the conversations that Angie's having at these meetings. I think you talk to lawyers and find out their experiences and whatnot. Along the way, a few years ago when my girls were small, I was working full time, and my ex-husband was a stay-at-home dad, and I just really missed my girls. I just really wanted to be the one home with them. And so we were looking at different options. And at that point, the Southern California real estate market being what it was, and him being a teacher, it wasn't really viable to live here in California. So we looked at Austin and we looked at Denver. Well, to prototype that, I had a conversation with one of the partners at my law firm course, it was confidential. So that's always good to be mindful of that, because I did have another conversation with someone I thought was confidential, but it was not. So do be careful of that. But anyway, so she and I, she went out for breakfast and we talked. And at that time, her kids were a little older than mine. They were, I think, middle school aged. And she was really frank and honest about whether I should move and whether, or, just whether or not it was time to leave law, whatever. And also about living in Austin. So she had some great insights. She told us like what neighborhoods to look at and kind of the general vibe of the city and things like that. And then, our other part of that prototype was actually flying to Austin and staying there. And obviously staying there for a couple of days isn't going to give you the whole experience of living there, but it's something, right? And I knew someone that she and her husband were trying to figure out where they wanted to retire to. And they're in the Bay Area of California. And they thought, well, they kind of looking at the Central Coast area, Monterey, that area. So they wanted to prototype it. They wanted to test it out. So they actually ended up with an opportunity, like a friend of a friend or something, to stay at a home while this other woman was on vacation. And so they got to live there for like 2 weeks or something, just, and they really got to experience it. So that's, that's a mini experience prototype. So you can do that. And some other ways to prototype as an attorney, you are talking to other lawyers in other positions. Like Andy talked about, connecting with your peers, and what your experience is might be different than the person over there. Maybe the person's like, I love my job. I do this, and this all day. And that's going to tell you a couple of things. Like maybe that's not what you want, right? Or maybe it's like, yeah, oh yeah, that sounds great. Like I want to do that too. Or, so you can get that. Just any conversation or any kind of networking events are opportunities to have prototyping conversations. And then similarly, you can do the prototyping experiences. So, that could be doing pro bono work or other kinds of legal clinic work. And you can also talk to people if you're at a big firm with different practice areas. One of the things you could do is talk to an attorney in a different practice area that you're interested in, right? And, and most attorneys are happy to tell you about themselves and about their career and their path and what they do. So you just want it to be quick but you can have those conversations. And then when it comes to like within your firm, maybe you pitch to your practice group leader that you'd like to try a project in this other practice group. And when you frame it as a prototype, it's less threatening to the people above you, right? They're like, okay, she just wants to explore. She just wants to test it out. It's one project, right? And so that can be a good way to approach it with someone. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tim Ferriss. He wrote the book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And he essentially in there, he talks about, which it's not my favorite book, honestly, but he did talk about it. He didn't call it a prototype, but that's basically what he did. He wanted to test out working remote. He wanted to pitch to his boss that he should be able to work from home at least a couple of days a week. So, like I said, he didn't call it prototyping, but what he did is he called in sick, I think, or like had a family emergency or some kind of deception there. And he worked from home, and then he was able to like get all these things done. So he went back to his boss and was like, hey, while I was home, I did all these things. Do you think this is something I could try for a couple of weeks, like working from home on Wednesdays or Thursdays or whatever it is. So, I mean, now like as if we have a choice, right? Everybody's working from home, but the idea is that, you can prototype things. And when you approach it with your boss of, hey, I want to just try this. I don't encourage deceiving your boss, but if you approach it with that kind of outlook of, hey, it's just something I want to try, hopefully that'll garner more support.
And you can always get your superiors involved in the conversation too. Sure. Ask them, what are some things, what are ways that you want to expand the practice area? Are there any ways that I can help with that initiative, that might actually get you to try something new in a sanctioned way? Yes. So, I think that sometimes it's hard for us when we're really, really junior to see what's the next thing coming down the pipe. Because, I think we're so caught up in trying to just do our jobs that sometimes it can be hard to think about, okay, what are the newest trends in our industry? But your boss may have a better sense of that. And they may have a sense like, hey, for example, when I was working in trademark and copyright law, social media law was becoming really big, right? There were all these new things coming down the pipeline, influencer agreements, all sorts of stuff. And our firm was interested in trying to get into that, but they didn't really have any expertise in it. And so I said, okay, can I be the one who tries to like learn about this area? Can I go to some conferences? Can I start writing about these topics? And they were like, absolutely. So I think you can, ask around to see what are ways that your practice area might be expanding.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tie it back to the value for the firm. So like when the firm was having you, Angie, go and learn about this area, that's an asset for them, right? That's something that gives them an edge in getting into that area of the law. And so I think that's really helpful, a really powerful way to be able to pitch your prototype, right? Is to say, hey, look, this could be really, really valuable and down the road. And it fits with the firm's objectives and the firm's values in these ways. So yeah, that's a great way to prototype too, is just to build on what you're already doing. And I think that's super valuable. And it's always nice to have the support of the firm that says, yes, we'll pay for the conferences. We'll pay for, that, because it's a lot harder to prototype on your own
Yeah,
when
more
there's costs involved. Yeah. So, I advocate for the smaller prototypes. They might, cost you a cup of coffee for someone else, assuming we get to meet people in person again. So, yeah. So I think, going forward, I know as lawyers, we're trained to be critical and analytical, and we're also risk averse, right? And so I think, it's only natural to not want to take that chance and take that risk. And that's one of the things that makes us really good advocates for our clients, because, we don't want to risk our clients' money if we don't have to, or risk their whatever it is, business and things like that. So you do want to be mindful of that. And it makes you a good attorney to be a little more wary of risks. But I think when it comes to your career, because, we're people and it's a human problem, and it's your problem, like your own, your world, your life, you can, maybe take some savvy risks. And that, I think what makes them savvy is that you've gathered the information, as much information as you can. You've prototyped, talk to people, all those different ways of prototyping, and you understand your own values, your own priorities, your personality. I'm an introvert. I'm like, I don't really want to be out there all the time. Some of the time, fine, but not all the time. And so, that kind of, you have that information, and you make the decisions based on that. But so that's why I call it like savvy risk taking. And I think when it comes to your career and your life, it's okay to take those risks and try to get a little more comfortable taking those risks. And I think prototyping is one way to do it. So, I think you want to embrace the designer's mindset by asking those open-ended questions. It reminds me of law schools like the T funnel, right? Like you start with the broad questions and then you can narrow it down. Well, we're kind of staying up at the broad, and actually design thinking, it kind of starts broad with like, what are we trying to do? And then you narrow it down to try a few things, and then you test, and then you kind of go back out again. So like, you kind of go back out to like, well, what happened? And do we need to go back and try something else and redesign things and tweak things? Like I had my partner's in healthcare, and he uses design thinking. He was the one that introduced it to me. And he had a project where they were trying to redesign the clinic experience. And so they're like, well, I know we'll like have this beautiful outdoor setting, and we'll have coffee, and we'll have this and that. And, and so they actually did a large scale prototype in like a warehouse, and they built a fake clinic and a fake outdoor, experience, whatever. And what they found was that people were still anchored to that clinic door. They didn't want to miss their turn when the nurse came out and said, their name, and they take them back, right? They didn't want to miss that. So even though they had beepers or pagers or something that would let them know, like you can go out and get a cup of coffee, you don't have to sit here right by the door. You can enjoy this beautiful environment. And no, that's not what happened. When they prototyped it, that's not what happened. People were still just right there at that door. So they're like, okay, well, we're not going to design that into our clinic designs right now, because it wasn't effective. It didn't really work. So, that was really valuable information and insight that they would not have had if someone had just said, we should create these experiences for people so they love coming to the clinic and they can walk around while they're waiting. It'll make waiting go faster. If they actually invested like serious money in building out their clinics like that without prototyping it first, they would have wasted a lot of time and money and effort, right? So that was a really valuable prototype. And I say favor action over perfection. And I've heard that it's sort of a variant of the done is better than perfect, which is hard for most of us, because most of us, I'm guessing, are perfectionists, and we like things, to go well and to go the way we think they're going to go. But I encourage you to just take an action, even if it's not perfect. You're not going to fail. You're just going to get more information. And also, I think the last piece is to really stay curious. if you're going into like, I wonder what this will be like, or I wonder, how other people have done this, or, you keep that curious mind. Cause I forget, I think it's like Walt Whitman or Thoreau. One of them said, judgment and curiosity can't coexist. So if you are curious, you are not going to be judging yourself. And that goes for externally to other people and also internally to yourself. Because I know a lot of us be really hard on ourselves when something doesn't go right. And so if you say curious, like, I wonder what happened there, then that's going to help you stay away from that judgment phase, which doesn't really help. So I'd say remember the best designs are human-centered and they're focused on you. So I want you to go out and create a great career, design a career for yourself. A great career.
Awesome. I loved that. Thank you so much, Katherine. Do we have any questions? You guys feel free to type your questions in the chat box or just get on camera and ask away. Anybody who wants to step up?
You all love design thinking and you're going to do it. You're going to go implement it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the meantime, while everybody's thinking about their questions, I actually wanted to jump in with a story. One time I interviewed a law student for a first-year associate position, and the young law student had all sorts of things on his resume. It looked like he was just confused. Like he was like, he had, first year summer was some criminal defense firm, and then he went and worked for corporate, and then he, tried out an externship in a completely different area, and he had a couple of extracurriculars on his resume that were totally unrelated, and I was like, so what is the story here? What are you doing? And I think a lot of us, especially when we're hiring, we want to make sure that people are going to stay. So we're tempted to say, you should have a demonstrated interest in these areas, and we want to see a ton of experience in these areas. But sometimes there's a story behind that is more compelling. And the young law student impressed me because he said, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to try a lot of different things. And out of each experience, these are the skills that I gained that I liked doing. So I tried to, find another job that used those same skills, but maybe led me in a different direction. And so after that, going through all these things, I settled on this practice area. But it's not just that I, have decided today, this is my practice area of the week. I actually started writing in this area, and I started blogging in this area, and I started doing all these other things in this area. And now I'm pretty convinced that this area is for me. And so, and his answer really impressed me because I thought, okay, this is not only a person who is intellectually curious about all these different paths. They're not just lost. Not all who wander are lost. Some who wander are doing it on purpose, and that's okay. And I think that can be an even more compelling story, because if you let yourself get trapped in, I'm not going to try this because it might lead me down the wrong road, then you won't have any experiences. And that to me is worse. If you try something and fail and decide, or try something and it just doesn't turn out your way, and then you want to try something else, and you're testing these hypotheses for yourself. I am always impressed by people who are willing to take those risks, try something, shift if it doesn't work, and reiterate and constantly tweak and tailor their career. And so I think it's okay to have tons of different experiences on your resume, as long as you can have a reason for it,
Yeah, that's a great story. I love that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of students are really terrified in law school if they have like all these different experiences and they're like, I don't have a cohesive story for this. That's okay. Think about the underlying skills that you learned in each job. Why did you chase after each job? It couldn't always be simply, I needed a job. But, I think that if you can come up with, what did you enjoy in each experience? What did you learn out of each experience? How did that lead you to your next experience? Those are things that can help you tie together all those pieces so that you can articulate for yourself, what is it that I really liked out of all of these experiences, and then figure out what's the next thing that can get you more of that. So.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Like I said, I love that story because it really shows you, you don't always know. I sitting here at almost 50, I'm like, I I went to law school, like didn't even know if I wanted to be a lawyer, let alone what kind of law I wanted to practice. And, and there were things in my first law firm that I really liked. I loved the people. I felt like everyone was really ethical and honest, except two, but then they were asked to leave the firm. So that was cool. And except as a first year attorney, guess who got to work with them the most?
Of course.
But yeah. So, but one of the things I learned was like, okay, I did eminent domain, right? I mean, I didn't go to law school to be an eminent domain lawyer, but I really liked working with these two. One at the time, one was a senior associate, and then the other was the partner. And then a couple of years later, they were both partners. But I loved working with them. I'm like, if they had been, I don't know, that would have been criminal, but if they had been, environmental lawyers or real estate transaction lawyers, I probably would be a real estate transaction lawyer. I mean, it just, for me, that was more important, was the people than the job. And there were things, so sometimes there are different factors that go into why you stay in a position and why you stay there. But I saw you question about a prototype transitions to a final design. Well, I'm not sure your design is ever really final. And maybe that's not what you want to hear, but I think it's close to final when it's almost like an instinct. It's like a feel, it feels right. It's hitting all those things that are important to you. And one of the reasons why it's never final is because sometimes things shift. And sometimes you start a family, or, your spouse or partner needs to move across the country for their job, or whatever it is. There's a million reasons why things can change. And so, it's never totally final. But I think when it feels right and you feel like you're being nourished and your needs are being met and you're playing to your strengths, then that's a good sign that's where you belong. I don't know, Angie, do you have any insight on when something's the right position?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly what you said. When you feel like you're playing to your strengths, when you're being valued for it, you need to know that you like and trust the people that you work with. If you don't like and trust them, that might not be the place for you. I really, really loved practicing trademark and copyright law. And I really worked hard while I was in law school to get a position where I could focus on just trademark and copyright law. But then over time, what I realized while I was practicing is I really liked mentoring young lawyers more. And, I really wanted to just do just that. And I think that when I was thinking about, okay, if I stay in this full-time job, the best I can do is maybe mentor one or two young lawyers alongside me and maybe bring a couple of people on, on the same path. But I didn't feel like that was enough. I really, really wanted to impact more people. So I had to find a way that I could do that. I had to design something new. And so that's okay. If you're working in a practice area and you're really, really happy and you like what you do and you trust the people that you work with, you might be closer to a final design. But if you discover a new aspect about it that you like more, don't be afraid to, retweak the plan. That's okay too.
Yeah, exactly. And your story reminds me so much. It was so similar to mine. It's like, what I really realized, what I really enjoyed, and my best experiences at the law firm, one of the best conversations, the part I enjoyed most was our women's affinity group meetings. And even as an associate, a junior associate, I remember we used to have these associate meetings, and they still do. I just didn't go to them after a while, but I was like, I was known, there were three of us and we're all in the same office in Orange County, California. And we got known as the vocal associates from Orange County. So, so that was kind of fun. But I really enjoyed that sort of thinking about the community, the culture of the law firm. And I didn't call it that then, but I think that's what it was. As I was there longer, they started a women's affinity group, and I loved those. We had women's retreats. We had women in our office. We'd have the Orange County women lunches, and I was, again, the vocal associate, and I just really enjoyed that. And so it's kind of a similar thing. I wanted to find a way where I could be part of a voice and advocate for for change and supporting more women in the workplace and diversity of all kinds. So, it's a similar thing. You don't always know, where you think you're going to go isn't always where you end up. I mean, like I said, I started as a teacher, right? And that, and then I was a lawyer, and then I was a consultant. Then I did do a brief stint with another small law firm, which talk about don't take a job just to take a job if you can help it. That was not a good move. I ended up with this really toxic workplace. But again, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what I wanted to do and what was important to me. And it also, it did enable me to support my family. And also I got my design thinking certificate, and I got my coaching certificate, and I was able to pay for those, because I had this job. So there were trade-offs. And I think sometimes that's important too, is sometimes there's a bigger picture that you have to consider. So I'm not saying stay where you're miserable, but there are trade-offs sometimes that you have to keep in mind. So.
Well, and I think that you should also surround yourself with people who are also, in the positions that you think you want to be in.
Absolutely, yeah.
I had the benefit of learning from a mentor who was a lawyer that I met right before I went to law school, and he had tried tons of different career paths. He actually started off as like a tough litigator in this mass tort firm, very big firm in Texas and really well known. And he litigated for 6 years. Then eventually he decided he wanted to go in-house, and he went in-house for a little while. Then he became a lobbyist. Then he decided to shift into cybersecurity when that was getting big. He went and got a cybersecurity certification, and then he started really, doing privacy work. He went and got an MBA. He shifted around a lot of different times.
Yeah.
And it made me realize that my career didn't have to be so static. And I think that if you find other people who are experimenting and who are moving around, it may help you, because one of the scariest things for me when I was jumping out to be an entrepreneur was I was working in big law. I was surrounded by all these people that were pretty determined to stay in big law. They had the cushy office job and they liked it, and that's totally okay. But it was hard when all my peers were like, "You're crazy, why are you leaving?"
Yeah.
And so I had to go and find some other people who were experimenting. And so I went and joined some entrepreneurship groups. I went and joined some groups with, other career coaches. I went and joined different groups with people who are a little bit more open-minded. And it really helped me find the support that I needed and find role models and mentors in the areas that I thought I wanted to pursue, that, were already successful in those areas, who could give me some advice on, okay, well, if you're really looking to transition, what are some ways that you can do it? And so I think that if you're thinking about moving around, if you're thinking about testing it out, the best way is to try to talk to some people that are already in those paths and see, what they think.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say try to find more than one, because everybody has different approaches and different experiences. But, if you just really connect with them and you're like, oh, I can really see myself in this person's shoes, then, that's a good indication that that's the right choice. And yeah, I would just encourage everyone to go out and talk to people and get in touch with people, join the networking groups and the legal, legal networking and non-legal networking too. If you're a woman, there's the Elevate, and which is a women's, I know, is that how you and I met, Angie? And I think we just met on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think we just met on LinkedIn.
Yeah. But
I think a lot of people on LinkedIn.
yeah, I do. Yeah. So, and I think, it's just really, you can really, that's the whole process of design thinking, is exactly what Angie was describing in terms of people that have made a lot of shifts. It's often thought of as like a linear process. There's 5 stages that you start with. Empathizing. So the empathy, getting to know who your customer is, or if it's you, getting to know yourself. And then you define a problem. Then you ideate, which could be like brainstorming or thinking about different ways to test that, or to create a prototype. And then you get to prototyping and testing. And it sounds very linear, but designers circle back through these all the time. And that's basically what you were describing, that he was just prototyping. He's just circling back to wait, this doesn't really fit my values. This job is not giving me the opportunity to to use this strength, and I really enjoy doing X, and so you go back to the empathy, and they might skip ahead to prototype, or whatever it is. It's an iterative process, it's not linear. And I think that's true for our careers too. I mean, in non-legal time, I don't know really any of my classmates that are working in fields that related to their majors. I mean, my sister is a biology major with a music degree, with a music and minor in music, and she does web design. So, I mean, and she works for an IT company. So it's like completely different, right? And so, I think it's okay to not know where you're going, because you do have tools that you can use to as a compass to find your way.
Yeah, I think the biggest and important takeaway that I had from today is that you do need to revisit your plan and figure out if each of the experiences that you put yourself through has taught you anything.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can feel like you're really wafting around and you're really lost because you're not taking the time to reflect on the experiences that you've had to figure out what did you actually like about them, what did you not like about them. If you're not doing that, then you're just going to continue testing and testing and testing. It's going to feel like you're just running into walls and you're never circling back to close that feedback loop. So I think the important thing is to maybe, not just try a gazillion new things, but don't
Right.
forget to stop, reflect on the experience, see, did it contribute to the hypothesis that you made?
Right.
And tweak it so that it gets a little bit closer to the hypothesis.
Yeah, 100%. You just have to, yeah. Prototyping is you're prototyping with a purpose, right? Your purpose is to gather information. Your purpose is to inform your next prototype. And so, yeah, you have to, you're not just aimlessly wandering.
Yeah, well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Yeah,
If anybody else has any questions and wants to reach out, do you mind if they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
yeah, not at all. Do you want me to put the link in?
Sure. Um, and everybody, it was so great seeing you guys today. And on Thursday, we're having another meetup, and this time it's going to be about trial practice, personal injury law, and med-mal. So if you're interested in any of those things, come hang out with us on Thursday at noon Central. All righty, everybody. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you guys all soon.
All
Thank you
right.
so much, Catherine.
Thanks, Angie.